Hello everyone, and welcome to our session today on Convert Cal Objects to AL using Windows PowerShell scripts. Joining us today is Ross Bottorf from Innovia Consulting, and we're excited to have such a fantastic turnout today. Before I pass it over to Ross to cover on this hot topic, I would like to remind you that this session is being recorded and it will be posted to our on-demand webinar library later this week for you to review and share with anyone. And if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the questions box. We will get them answered during our Q&A time at the end of our session. So now I will pass it on to Ross to kick off our presentation.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ross Bottorf. I've been a nav developer since 2005, when it was called Navision, and then, and also when it was called Dynamics NAV, and now that it's called Business Central. And we started out with a language called Cal in the past, and we could export our objects and import them into other environments and be able to use them. Well, now we have Business Central and we have extensions, and we have a new language called AL, which we need to convert those objects to if we want to use them in our extensions. And that's what this script does. It converts our Cal objects into AL objects. And we will be, you'll be needing those to open them up in VS Code and make your extensions. You will need some software, your typical software, your Dynamics Nav 2018 or Dynamics Nav or Dynamics 365 Business Central. It has to have the text to al.exe along with it, so we start with 2018. If you want to convert older objects, like from 2017 or 2013, or even, you could go back as far as your earlier versions, you would need to convert your 2009 objects into pages and so forth. But once you have them in a 2013 format, you can import those objects into a newer database like 2018 or Business Central and then convert those. You will need Windows PowerShell ISE for this script as well. Let's talk a little bit about the script. What we have here is the first part of it. It's not the whole thing. We have a couple slides with it. Here we have our parameters. This is a function that we're going to be importing into Windows PowerShell ISE, and we'll be running it via the command add-on. So you'll be able to bring this up. You'll be able to type it in the search box in your command add-on window and select this function, and it will ask you for some parameters. These are the parameters. Can talk about them just a little bit. So we have our client folder. That's the actual path to the fin.exe, or the finsql.exe. So there is a default. It defaults to the path for Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. You will want to change that in the parameter if it's different. If it isn't, you can leave the parameter blank and just run it, and it will choose the default folder. There is a filter parameter. By default, it will look in your FinSQL environment in your development client and see what you have locked. Whatever you have locked with your username, it will export that object. So you could leave that parameter blank and it will use that default. And to select your objects, you just open up your development environment, you select whatever you want to, and you just lock it. And then this parameter will pick it up. You can change it to use other accepted string filters. At the back of this PowerPoint presentation, there's a URL that can take you there, take you to more information, and you can look up different filters if you wanted to enter it there. In my opinion, it's just easier for me to go in and lock an object. I can lock whatever I want. I can filter in the development client much more easily and just lock things and then export them. Okay, the next parameter, remove split files. This defaults to true. If you leave it blank, it'll default to true. It removes some files that are generated for the conversion. Files that aren't needed after the files are converted to AL. You can set that parameter to false if you wanted to view them for some reason, if you needed to troubleshoot. Same thing for remove export file. That's a file that gets exported. It has all the objects in it, pre being split out into separate files. And that's not needed as well after the objects are converted. So this script will remove that by default. If for some reason you wanted to view it, you could set that parameter to false and you could view it after it's run. Our database name, this script currently has it set to mandatory. You have to fill it in. We can discuss later how to change that to false. You just basically change mandatory to false, and then you enter in a default value. But for now, the script uses mandatory, and you'll have to enter in the database name. Same thing for the database server. You can make that default if you want. You can set the mandatory to false, but you could and then enter in a default value. But for now, you'll have to enter in something. Our next two lines there, just variables that finds out where your documents folder is, and it has an extension start ID. We default it to 50,000. We don't put it in a parameter because we don't use it. You can take that out and put it in a parameter if you want to, but we don't have a use for it, so we just default it. This script does generate some folders and automatically for you. It will be in your documents folder. It'll create a subfolder called Innovia, and then a subfolder called cal2al, where it houses your scripts. Excuse me, where it houses your files. Okay. The next pane is the rest of the script. There's not too much here. Covered a little bit. We have the import module. When you do your install for your Dynamics 365 Business Essential or 2018, and you install your development tools, a development shell gets installed. This line of script, the import module, imports that and allows you to use it in Windows PowerShell ISE. Okay, the next chunk of line, the next two lines, it's actually creating the export file. It's looking at your development client, it's looking at the objects you've locked, or whatever you filtered things by, and it's creating an export file with all those objects in it. The next line below that, the split nav application object file actually splits that export file into separate files. Next couple lines below that will convert those split files into AL files. And it will put them into a folder called target. That's where you'll find your output. And the next few lines will handle the removing of the split files and the removing of the export file. Loading the script. So we've offered a handout, so you can go to the meeting section, the webinar section. You can get the handout. Our script is in there. You can download that, open it in Word, and you can copy that script. And you'll want to copy it into a file called Microsoft PowerShell ISE _profile.ps1. And that should be located in your documents folder in the Windows PowerShell folder. If you don't have a Windows PowerShell folder, you'll want to create it. No spaces, just Windows PowerShell. And if you don't have the PowerShell ISE file, you'll want to create that. You can use, right-click, new document, and rename that file to Microsoft.PowerShell ISE _ profile.ps1, just like you see here. Okay, here's your directory, Windows PowerShell, and there's your file. Again, create them if you don't see them. Okay. And what we would do is we would right-click on that file and choose Edit. The Windows PowerShell ISE will open, and you'll want to paste that script that we sent you in there. If there's already existing code, you don't paste over it, just go down the bottom and paste it in the function down at the bottom. Okay. This is what it'll look like in ISE after you've input it, after you copied it in there. And you can also, at any time when you're in Windows PowerShell ISE, you can click on the file, open, and then you can go and view that and edit it as necessary. After you've pasted that script into your IS profile _ ISE file, you can close it, close Windows PowerShell ISE, and then you can reopen it. When you reopen it, run it as an administrator. Okay, running the script. We'll go over the parameters again. There's a default locked by your user ID. So you open up your development client, you choose your objects, filter them however you want to in the development client. You can lock all of them all at once. And you can lock a few, you can go to the pages, you can select things individually, lock whatever you want to. And if you're not familiar with that, you go up to File, Lock in your development client after selecting your objects. Okay, so after we've selected our objects, run the PowerShell ISE as administrator. If the command add-on dialog is not visible, you just click up View on your menu, and then you select Show Command Add-on. Once you have your command add-on visible, you can click on the Innovia name. You can type in Innovia in the name box, click on the Innovia cal to AL function. And after you select that, you'll see your parameters. You'll see the database name, database server. Again, it has a default. Without changing the script, you could change that parameter. Just enter in the new folder path, the correct folder path in the client folder. And again, the filter parameter can be changed. If you leave it blank, it will default to your locked by user ID. So here's an example: database name, database server, client folder, filters blank. If you wanted to set your remove export file, that's your syntax. If you want to set it to false, $ false. Remove split files, $ false. And again, if you want them to be removed by default, you just leave it blank, or you do $ true. Okay, after you enter in your parameters, you click on the Run button at the bottom, and then you can view your output window and see how it's doing. If it runs successfully, it will look roughly like this. It'll give a list of the objects that it exported. If it did encounter an error, it will show it to you. If it didn't catch it, if it wasn't trapped, if it wasn't caught, it'll display here. If you happen to run your script and nothing's exported, you don't have any files, for instance, there are 2 files that are also output that you can look at. They'll be located in your Innovia cal to AL folder in your documents, the log export file.txt, and your nav command result. They'll have information for you if there were errors encountered in other places during the script. Here we have some useful links. We have a text to AL.exe documentation if you wanted to learn more about that, see what's going on with behind the script. And we have our finsql.exe command prompt. That's what your development client is. It's the finsql.exe, but there are commands that you can do using the command prompt for various things, for an upgrade or to export files. This link will have more information for that. We started out using a cal to AL conversion from Waldo's blog. And I found that to be very, very useful. It didn't work the best in our environment, the way we had our environment set up, because we had multiple service tiers on a different machine than what we're actually developing on. So, but it was a start, and we were able to take what we've learned from that and make our own. Okay. Now, before we go to questions, it's time to run the script. So, give me a moment here. I'm going to take our handout. I'm going to copy that script. I'm going to navigate to my Windows PowerShell folder and my documents. Again, if that doesn't exist, create it. If this file doesn't exist, the Microsoft PowerShell ISE _profile PS1, if that doesn't exist, create it. I'll just go ahead and get rid of what I have there. Again, if you have existing code and you want to keep it, you can just paste this down at the bottom. Okay, so I've loaded my script. I'm going to run my Windows PowerShell ISE again as an administrator. I have my function, Innovia cal to AL. Click on it. I've got my parameters. The folder path to my client is not the same as the default, so I have to change it. For that, I just go to my shortcut and I open the file location and I copy that. I'm going to leave my filter blank. I'm going to leave the remove export file blank and the remove split files blank. Let's go back to our development client. So here's my development client. I'm going to lock a I already have one object lock. I'll go ahead and lock a couple more. Do a report. Let's do the purchase order. File lock. Let's do a page. File lock. All right. Let me go back to our PowerShell.exe and click on the run. Oh, if you have a named instance, you'll need to include that in your database server. This is the database server is your SQL instance that you're pointing to. Click on run. And we have our AL files. They've been output to the target folder in your documents, Innovia, Cal to AL. We go and view those. Here's our AL files. These are the files that you would use in VS Code and use near extensions. Of course, if you're using extensions, you'll need to, of course, change these object IDs to the range that you're allowed. You'll notice that the script output the purchase order RDLC along with the purchase order report. So for reports, it will output an AL file as well as the RDLC that it references. Okay. Now, when I ran this, a dialog popped up asking me if I wanted to overwrite files. That's because previously I'd run this script and I told the system to not remove my split files and not remove my export file. If I were to run this now, it will generate those files again. And it removed them, so I wasn't prompted again. And if I'm not done exporting, maybe I missed something, maybe I forgot, I meant to include another object, go ahead and just go back to that object. I haven't closed my Windows PowerShell ISE, so I can just run it as much as I need to. So now we have our vendor card being output. Okay, for the errors, let's take a look at that. I removed my my named instance so I could generate an error. Okay, and this error is the script couldn't find the export file. If I go to my Innovia Cal to AL, I'll get some more information. Our command result, command completed with some errors, see the error log. And it couldn't find my SQL server. Now, if I didn't have the system remove my split files, or if I didn't have it remove the export file, actually, and I were to encounter an error like this export file not found, if I hadn't have removed that after running my script, it would still be in the system, and then when I rerun this, it's gonna run again with the with the same export file that it created before. And you won't get an error. The script will work. But meanwhile, I've changed something that it didn't allow it to be overwritten. So you could run this script and not know that there was an issue. You just wouldn't see your new files being output. So that's why we have the script automatically removing it by default. Again, if you wanted to keep it and view it, you could set this to false, your export file, and if you wanted to keep your split files, you could set this parameter to false as well. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about changing your defaults. So I'm going to click File, Open. I'm going to browse to my Microsoft PowerShell ISE_profile. I'm going to open it. I've got some parameters, and if you're working in an environment where you don't have to change your database all the time, and you don't have to change your SQL Server all the time, they're always going to be the same. You can set those parameters. Give it default values. Close it. Reopen it. You'll notice there's no asterisks by these parameters anymore. It means they're no longer mandatory, but they do have default values. So if you leave them blank, they will use the default values. The only thing right now, I didn't change my client folder to a different value in my script, so I'll still need the correct one. I didn't type something correctly. But, I can always go back and I can modify my file again. But instead of troubleshooting that, know that can be done. And we can go ahead and pass it along back to Angie.
All right, thank you, Ross. If anyone does have any questions, please feel free to type those in the questions box and we will get those answered. We'll give just a few moments. None have come through as of yet, but we'll give them just a few more moments. All right, Ross, it appears you're off the hook today. So if you do decide that you have some questions that you want to discuss with us at a later time, please feel free to contact us and we would be more than happy to address those with you. So thank you, Ross, for presenting today, and to everyone on today's call, thank you for watching and joining us if you are on demand. And we do have some webinars coming soon. Actually, next week we are taking the week off for the holiday, And then we pick back up on July 9th with Mark Hamblin from InsightWorks, and he will be presenting on time tracking and production scheduling with Dynamics 365 Business Central. And don't forget to check out our website for more of our upcoming events. We're always adding more events to our website. And I also want to mention that we have our new podcast going on. It's called the Innovia Conversation. And you can find all the different podcast platforms to listen to on our podcast page. And that is innovia.com/podcast. So check out our podcast selection and subscribe to see how you can get notified when new episodes are available. All right. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon on another Innovia webinar. Have a great day, everyone, and happy 4th to you next week. Thanks, Ross.
You're welcome. Thanks, everyone.